Excellent. So we're live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the AI series. Thank you very much for joining us. The AI series is run with Oxygen Digital, and we have our guest panelists today as well, who I will introduce to you very shortly. Just want to give a little bit of an overview of Oxygen Digital and the platform in case you haven't used it before. So Oxygen Digital, we are specialists in AI and data science recruitment globally. I'll pop some details in the chat if you'd like to have a look, if you are looking for your next career move, or perhaps you're looking for your next recruitment solution. In regards to LiveStorm, if you haven't used it before, please take a look on the right-hand side. You will see a panel where you have a few different options. If you see a poll in the polls tab, please feel free to vote on that. We may well use it within the session today, so your opinion is greatly valued. If you have a question that you'd like to ask, just pop it in the questions tab and we'll get round to it when we can. If you see a question on there that you would like answered, click the upvote, and that makes sure that we know that it is something that everyone wants answered, and we'll get to that sooner. If you have any questions or anything that you'd like to say, you can pop it in the chat tab to chat with each other, our panelists, or if you do have any technical issues or any problems, then you can reach myself in there as well. The event will be recorded and will be available via email after the event, and also it will be uploaded onto YouTube to access at any time as well after the event. So please keep an eye out for that too. So I'll go ahead and we'll do a little bit of a round robin to introduce everyone, and then I'll pass over to Igor to kickstart the event. So Igor, if you'd like to introduce yourself first.
Absolutely. So I'm Jager Craft, and I have been doing data science since nobody called it that, since the late 90s to be precise, in all sorts of organizations, from nonprofits to investment banks, startups, and now what I guess you would call a scale-up called WISE. And my current favorite project is crossbreeding AutoML with causal inference, because it's one of the domains where AutoML hasn't arrived yet.
Excellent. Thank you, Igor. Mark, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, yes, thanks. I'm Mark Rowan, founder of Rowan Cognitive Data Science Solutions. I've been working also in data science for around a decade now. Similar to Igor, I was working with artificial intelligence before that became a buzzword as well. So going quite far back to the early 2000s. So I consult, I work freelance, I coach also aspiring data scientists. So various different industries I've been involved with as well. Very happy to share my experiences. I have, amongst other things, built an AutoML framework, again, before these were really on the market. Wish I have seen the market for it at the time. But this is an area that I'm very happy to share with.
Great, thank you. Afgha?
Thank you so much, Laura. My name is Afgha Schouten. I was born and raised in the Netherlands, and I have a background in mathematics and econometrics. I've also been in the field for over 10 years now. Worked as a data scientist, but also analytics team lead and translator. At the moment, I have my own company, AI Bridge, where I focus on, basically building the bridge between the business and data science world. And I do that in consulting, corporate training, upskilling of people on both sides of the medal to kind of bring them closer together to generate value with this topic. And obviously, AutoML platforms is an important topic. It will change, or is already changing, the industry. So I'm excited for today.
Excellent. And finally, Paul, over to you.
Thank you. My name is Paul. I'm one of the founders of Tensora. We are a small data and AI consultancy and solution house based in Hamburg, Germany. Basically working on different problem types and different setups in the AI space, building solutions for sometimes niche problems that are very specialized, but also for solutions that we're planning basically to make available as a service for a more general and larger audience of people and customers.
Great, thank you, everyone. So I'll go ahead and pass over to you now, Igor. And again, if anyone has any issues, please pop them in the chat. Any questions along the way, pop them in the questions tab and we'll get round to them. Thank Thank you.
Wonderful. So just to set the stage for the discussion, as you're all no doubt aware, free libraries for creating models with minimal need for user input or tuning, shorthand called AutoML, are getting both better and spread out to more domains. And on the other hand, there are libraries like GPT-3, which can now accept freeform text and generate code as a result. They're not perfect yet, but if you think ahead maybe 1 or 2 years, you can easily imagine a world where model creation and machine learning algorithm creation is essentially free, both in terms of money, but also in terms of the skills required, or something you could pick up in a weekend, say. And what would that mean for organizations that are trying to add value with ML? Would we need a different organizational structure? What would that mean for people who want to make a living in machine learning, as I think most of us do because it's fun? What kind of role? What would those roles look like? And to be a bit provocative, you can remember that once upon a time there was a profession called typist. It was a person whose job was there to sit at a typewriter and type things, and all offices had something called a typing pool. That was an actual physical room where people sat whose job was to type things. And then computers happened, and now the only place you encounter that is old detective stories. Afgha, what do you think? Will data science teams in many organizations go the way of the typing pool?
That's a very good question, and I like the provocative statement. I do think that the role of the data scientist will change, right? I don't think it will fully go away. So I see actually there are two directions it can or maybe should go, or maybe even 3. So one is the direction of actually, well, checking if the output of the AutoML platform is correct, right? They're like statistical implications, things that, well, they're connected to the real world that we still need human intelligence to do so. It's just I think they can make more models in a shorter time. And I think another implication, if you look at on the organizational side, is rather the bottleneck will be to get the rest of the organization up to speed, to help them find use cases, prioritize the right one, translating that still into a data science problem, because that's something that the AutoML platforms cannot do. So I'm anticipating that will be a bigger bottleneck than what we've maybe seen in the last couple of years to actually build the model and write the code and putting it into production.
Thank you. And Paul, what do you think?
Yeah, first of all, I find it really interesting to think of GPT-3 as maybe also sort of an approach to possibly do something like AutoML. But in general, I think I completely agree with Afgha that I think the problems or the things that we spend our time on as data scientists will change a lot, and I think that basically happens on a daily basis, or with every new library that comes out that does something cool or that automates something that we haven't automated before. I think we have the also benefit of making ourselves a little bit more efficient on what we work on. And just thinking of my work and my position as a data scientist in the consulting space, I also feel like the model building, like designing and training, is really just a very small fraction of what we do. So I don't think that, by a long shot, we will have these AutoML solutions that will fully replace the job of a full-time data scientist. But of course, we will, transition to focusing our time and work on maybe other things if we can kind of automate these processes that we've used to kind of fiddle around with different model families, trained them, and then kind of saw what worked best, and then also like tuning the hyperparameters. I'm not really so scared of that, to be honest. I also kind of like the fact that these tools can take off some of the work that we do as data scientists. But I absolutely agree that this landscape of what we kind of focus our time on will definitely change over the next years to come.
Okay, hopefully Mark can rejoin us soon. He's probably having problems with his connection. But in the meanwhile, so let's suppose that model building is free. What then will be the biggest bottleneck in actually adding value in organizations using machine learning or using data science?
So I would think that, and we can kind of see this in the position of the data engineer, that most of the time, or very often at least, it's the availability of data. Making data pipelines, making sure that that the data is in the right format and quickly accessible whenever we need it. So I think that this also happens now. If you look at the job market, it's arguably harder to find data engineers than it is to find data scientists. I think that over the past years and with all these big steps that we made in the AI space, many people got really interested in that and kind of fiddle around and learn about different models. I think we're also coming into a time where the coding side of things and the development side of things becomes more important. I think a few years back, it was okay to be a data scientist and to be a terrible coder because you kind of only lived in your Jupyter notebook and did your small things. I think today it's also about scaling up and productionizing and doing all of that quickly and in a stable fashion. And I think that data scientists need to transition and also become good coders and kind of, be actual developers in this big system that many corporations have.
Mark, good to have you back. What do you think? What are the organizational implications if model building were to become free? What will be the biggest bottleneck for organizations to add value using machine learning?
Really, it's going to be about getting access to usable data. I mean, the platforms that are there now are so simple to drag and drop your data and press go, or import a couple of lines into a Python script. As Paul said, it's not just the ability to understand where your modeling, etc., fits into a product, it's also where it fits into the organization. So actually, like I said earlier, the idea that the typist is a profession just no longer is seen as necessary. We could imagine a near future, where not just advanced Excel usage is somehow a prerequisite for many middle management jobs, but perhaps the ability to work with machine learning models in AutoML could become more commonly seen as a standard feature to have for middle management. Danger there, of course, is, as we know, if you set up your machine learning model with a data set that is not properly evaluated, you might have data in there with target leakage. You might have any number of things that need some expertise, some real knowledge. It's like saying that giving people more powerful tools requires greater responsibility on their usage. So I see the bottlenecks becoming really in having people who are still expert in what business data means and how it translates to the outcomes that the machine learning model will give. The hope is that this remains a bottleneck in, obviously as a data scientist, I have a personal interest in that. But what I hope to see is that it remains as a specialism, because it becomes more dangerous to make predictions based on AutoML process that are essentially wrong because of lack of specialist knowledge. That's not going to go away, even though the process of training a model becomes easier. You need people focusing still on understanding what is the implication of the usage of the data that's going in and predictions coming out.
Could I pop in quickly also, just focusing on what Paul said earlier, right? You said, hey, data engineering, and I fully agree. One thing is I see so many organizations, they all struggle with finding right data engineers. So I would say #make data engineering sexy. I think we can do something about that. But having said that, I think at the same time, in a couple of years' time, I expect that a lot of the work that data engineers will do now, we can also automate. So it's probably a rather short or maybe even a midterm peak that we will see in these skills, but then thereafter it will go back and even more to also what Mark just said, yeah, in terms of the business skills. But there again, fully agree. We need to keep the really in-depth statistician or AI specialists to actually review what these AutoML systems do. Yeah.
But then just to follow up on that, supposing you are in the organization which is trying to use more ML in their stuff because they think that the barrier to entry is falling, as it certainly is. What is the best way to structure the organizationally? Suppose you're a mid-sized organization, maybe a couple thousand people, so you want to hire more than one person. Is it what is the right balance between ML engineers and data scientists in the beginning? And should the data scientists be a data science team, embedded people in product teams, or maybe just a skill that you encourage existing employees to acquire?
Yeah, I mean, what I typically hear as a benchmark is for every one data scientist, you need at least 3 data engineers, and I would say at least 1 analytics translator, right? A person that creates the bridge between the business and the rest of the team. And I would say organizations when they get started, they should focus on a central team, and it's something that should be C-level supported and put into a place that is highly visible into the company to kind of get the first use cases going. But then at a later stage, as soon as you actually have your first models into production and they actually need to be maintained, and we require different skills, and then the business knowledge is more important. And then I would say it's time to also set up like product focused teams with AI knowledge, but perhaps more the citizen data scientist type of role, but still maintain also the central team where the person, what Mark also said before, we need this person that is able to review the output, but maybe we don't need as many as we need today because a lot of things are automated, but we still need this person so that we can, I would say also prepare for things like the EU regulations that are coming up. There will be many things that need to be sorted for which we need the specialist know-how. And then in terms of the size of the team, right? I already talked about the different ratios of number of people, and what I find middle-sized companies, they're often struggling. They're still struggling with finding the budget and the money to actually get something like that started, to actually say we need 5 people. That's probably an overkill, right? And there it could be a possibility to look into AutoML platforms so that you can actually get fewer people on board, and still these platforms also cost money, and it's something that we need to weigh in. I'm not sure if they're yet at the price that is feasible, or that it's actually cheaper than hiring a data scientist that does everything open source. I'd be happy to get the view of the others, but something to consider, definitely.
Paul, Mark, what do you think?
I would actually also throw my vote into the ring for saying if I had to make the decision, I would vote for a central data science team. In addition to what Afgha said, and that's also something that I noticed during the home office time during Corona, is that I kind of miss just sitting in an office with 7 or 8 other data experts and just talking about new papers and kind of exchanging ideas. And someone might have a problem that comes up, and just ask into the room, hey, do you have any ideas how you would prepare that data, or what you would do when this or that problem comes up? And sure, you could of course say, well, you can just call the person, have a video chat about it, but there's something about a little bit more effort to actually call someone and ask him or her directly than it is to just ask a question in an open room of experts. And personally, I really miss this exchange of ideas. I think that for the job, it can also make sense to have single data scientists in different teams. But I think that for the data science knowledge of the entire company, it can definitely benefit of sometimes having them in one room and exchanging ideas that may also translate to different branches of the company or different types of problem that in the mathematical world may be somehow related, even though they're maybe not when you address the specific problem that the team has where you need the solution.
No, that's an excellent point, and I couldn't agree more. But on the other hand, how do you then avoid a problem I've encountered in some of my earlier jobs of the data science team essentially pursuing its own agenda, which made sense to it and presumably senior management? But if you actually wanted to get anything done, you had to hire somebody onto the desk who was not called a data scientist, because then they would report to the data science team, would actually be a data scientist who's working for your team, which is far from optimal. So how can you avoid this situation?
Question addressed to me directly?
Yeah, I think to you and then to Mark as well.
Yeah, because I think it's an absolutely fair point that you make. I have no better answer at the moment to kind of look at the situation individually. I think what you're stating can absolutely happen, and you kind of see that kind of maybe the data scientists are pushing towards a direction to say, hey, we kind of want to work with cooler, newer types of technologies like generative models or something, and so they might recommend, they might come up with this own agenda of ideas. Hey, we really want to work on this stuff, so we better recommend that to the business side. I think there's some truth to that. I think it makes sense, or it can help to have an experienced person that basically leads that team and makes sure that this does not happen. Also, someone who's maybe sitting in the same room and kind of makes sure that the data science team cannot go rogue or anything. But personally, I would say that it's a very individual question that you have to ask when this situation comes up in your team or in your business. But maybe Mark has a better idea.
I love the idea of the data science team has gone rogue. Now we're creating giant models everywhere that bogging down the servers. Yeah, I mean, this is something that I've seen time and time again, and I've also been doing myself. It's, hey, that thing looks cool, and go and chase it like a dog chasing the butterfly. It does need somebody who's focused on the business value of the work. Typically would be the team leader who will direct the team back on to the right path when necessary. But I think it comes down to aligning the interests, right? If a data scientist is in a company because they want to play with cool stuff, that's not aligned with the interest of the company, which is to make value out of data. So whether that comes down to hiring the right people or to managing in the right way, it needs to be done at a cultural level. And I think this comes back to the topic of the AutoML, right? We think of machine learning, we think of data science when we're not careful as getting the best score, the best performing model, the highest Kaggle score. This is not data science. This is a tiny little subset for some problems where we might want to famously increase performance by 1 percentage point, and that's worth millions of dollars. Yes, there are, of course, some of these cases, but how about the task where we show to the chief of marketing that the price increase strategy actually causes loss of revenue after 12 months because of customers leaving the company, and therefore changing the company strategy based on simple analytics? That is data science, and that requires cultural direction and honestly getting away from this idea that just finding the best score is somehow machine learning, is somehow data science. And AutoML, it has the risk of driving us in that direction of saying press the button and get the highest score. We should be ideally looking for press the button and get the biggest impact.
That's right. Yes, maybe can I add to that?
Yes, please.
Because I think what you said, Mark, is like people are in the job with the wrong mindset. That's also something I've seen very, very often. And I think that the problem starts earlier. The problem starts in how people are being educated to become a data scientist, and the view or how how people think when they're in such education, how the job looks like is completely different from what a real life job is. Yeah. So they spend 80% of their time training models and learning how to do that in Python, for example. Whereas actually, it should be the other way around. It should be 80% of the time educated in how to collect data, how to clean data, what questions to ask, how to present results, etc., etc. And I think once we actually change that and make this, well, also this part of the job sexy, if I can use the word again, then people will see the benefit and getting into jobs with a different set of expectations. And then when they get into, yes, the rest of what you said before. Sorry, Igor. Back to you.
No, absolutely. And Afgha, to follow up on this, do you think another solution, especially with AutoML, could be to turn this around and just to say, maybe let's have one hardcore expert in the company, but otherwise let's just take product managers and developers and people who are really close to the front line and just give them ML as a skill set. And this way you don't have, this way you wouldn't have to worry about alignment, but you might have to worry about other things.
Yes, I mean, I think I can be very short in the answer. I think that's what we're heading towards, right? That there will be more focus needed because we can produce more models after in a shorter period of time. We will need to find the right use cases. We need to know, and in that case, right, when we're talking about citizen data scientists, may not be somebody who need to code, but can ask the right questions, and then partner up with this highly statistical person in the central team, kind of, well, asking the right questions. It's like, oh, I have my AutoML platform. What's the right objective function? Should I use root mean squared error or mean absolute error, and why? And let's talk about what the implication is for the impact, as what Mark said before, rather than just, oh, I pick one of them and I try to get the highest score, or I pick the one where I get the highest score, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And now there's nothing like real world experience. And for example, in WISE, we actually take a slightly different strategy than what we just discussed, because the data scientists are embedded in the product teams. And it's very much the hope and the intention that a data scientist's first loyalty, if you wish, or their sense of identity is tied up in the product team first and foremost. And then there is a kind of a virtual data science team on top, which where the reporting lines go into, so to enable information exchange and all this intellectual stimulation and all those things. But I wonder, have you seen any kind of other interesting organizational setups in that respect that have worked particularly well or particularly badly? Of course, there's nothing like a horror story.
Not so much. I mean, not a lot to add here, but maybe just from the consulting side. So we usually think in projects, and these projects can, of course, also happen with different companies and clients. I think what you're describing is a valid approach. I would also kind of question, is it really such a big difference? I mean, you have your horizontal and you have your vertical that you kind of play in. And does it really make a big difference if you're in the product team first and foremost and get additional information from other data scientists, or if you're in a data science team that works then in product projects? I'm not entirely convinced at the moment that it will make such a big difference. But maybe that's a bit naive. I'm not sure.
I would say in the short term, it maybe doesn't make a big difference, but in the longer term, it will, right? Think about an organization that has, I don't know, we have a sales team and then also a sales analytics team where the sales products are there. What does it mean for those people? They are rather focusing on, well, implementing new sales models, but also monitoring the models that they have and improving them, right? You maybe have your operations analytics team that does the same thing, but we require different skill sets there than in a central team. And you may have a central team that focuses on, hey, building the strategy, updating the tooling and things like that. But you may also have part of that, like an experimentation team, where it's like a lot about finding new use cases within the organizations where you need a different skill set, right? Which is much more back to when you get started, the team, but then there's a specific team that just does that. And then in the different product teams, it's much more about your own part of the business focus, as well as more about maintaining and improving the models that you have in production, is what I would expect. But I haven't seen, well, for example, in Switzerland, I haven't really seen an organization up to that level yet. I think some of the more mature ones are slowly moving into that direction. And I think the way this is set up is maybe for like big tech organizations that you see in Silicon Valley that really have many models in production. But I would envision that's where we will go to in a couple of years.
Yeah, I would say a data scientist only has value when she or he understands the domain in which they're working. Otherwise, it's totally an automated process, right? So that's why we have AutoML. Is when we don't care about domain knowledge, we just throw stuff in and press the button. So yeah, we need to have data scientists embedded where the business happens. And that can be as part of a product team, or it can be in many different organizational setups. In startups, you won't have anything like that. You're just going to have a couple of people working very closely together. I have horror stories from startups. I have horror stories from big companies as well. But what I've seen it work well has been in one former company of mine in particular. The team, the centralized team, is expertise with, of course, the technical skills and less close to the business. But the locally embedded data scientists who are very, very close to the business are in constant communication. So there's a sharing of skills between local and central data scientists in the company. And then there's a sharing of business knowledge also between those. So no one group has all of the highest skill or all of the resources, or indeed all of the access to business knowledge, but only as a combination. Over time, that company has not needed anymore to go searching for use cases. It's become such a clear value add that people come to the data science team saying, we have this problem, can you help us solve it? And that's the holy grail. And I guess, Afgha, sorry, but this is where part of the translator job becomes less valid, is because your data science team is now upskilled in the business, and the connection is directly there. The bridge, to use your analogy, is built. And this is the place to get to, rather than sitting in an IT department coding and not interacting with people. That maybe starts this way, but we need to move in that other direction.
That I couldn't agree more. And building up on that, as you know, if model building and other and potentially even data engineering becomes, if not free, then much cheaper to do time-wise and skill-wise, then it would. But then it very likely would become feasible and even desirable to have hybrid profiles. So you wouldn't have a person who is a data scientist only. But for example, one that's already been discussed is a data scientist who is also a bit of an engineer. So data scientist / DevOps hybrid, for example. What you might call a full stack data scientist. You heard it here first. That's going to be the next hyped up profession. But is what I'm betting on. But what are other hybrids that you think are feasible and desirable that people might want to build up as a skill set? Afgha, what do you think?
So I think it's we can go two directions when people want to choose, right? So it's like a specific industry. If you want to like be knowledgeable, for example, in banking or insurance, to really become an insurance data scientist, yeah, or even a step deeper, for example, an operations data scientist or a sales data scientist, right? I think we will get to that level. I mean, in the insurance industry, we know the role of the actuary, which is a very specific role where people are upskilled to do certain type of models for determining either the price or how much money the insurance company should put aside. And I'm expecting that in data science, it will go into a similar direction. So like a domain or an industry to focus on. Second thing that you can think about is, do I want to be like in the product team kind of data scientist, where I'm focusing on monitoring and improving my models and being in touch more with the business side? Or do I want to be the one that is kind of still in the central team, monitoring, supporting on, well, the very large statistical questions, data scientists, or thinking even of preparing for the regulations to come, right? Becoming a reviewer. Yeah, there will be many questions that people will ask. I'm pretty sure that most of us know or are able or have experience with not making enough model documentation. At one point, it will become mandatory. So writing it, reviewing it, asking the right questions. Do you have the right model assumptions? That you check your data distribution? That you document that and these things. So that's another direction to go to.
Excellent. I haven't actually thought about this one before, so thanks. Yes, but absolutely seems like, data science / legal hybrid is a role that will only become more in demand in the coming years, especially in Europe.
Igor, I think I'd like to ask you just to cast your mind back as well. As you said, you've been doing data science since before it was known as that. And for sure, you would remember the time when basically you were, I'm sure, responsible for the whole process. And that also kind of describes the start for many startups. Data science is such a widely defined role that it includes the full stack, the DevOps, understanding the domain, etc. If anything, we're only looking at the tail end of that process now. We talk about hybrid roles, but data science grew up as a hybrid role. LinkedIn, for example, with the famous use cases involving integrating into the website and A/B testing and then communicating results to the top level management, all of this within single profiles. It's only in the last years that we started to specialize. And funny enough, now we start to see that over specialization makes us lose focus on or lose overview on everything. So if anything, I'd say we're turning the wheel back a little bit and actually coming towards the realization that over specialization doesn't help. We need to have wide skill sets. And that includes analytics translation, use case generation, business understanding, coding, development, etc. But we need people who have skill sets across multiple silos.
But would you say, that absolutely is a valid point, but would you say this is a matter of how the concept of data scientist has evolved over time? Or is it more a question of what stage of the life cycle a particular company is in?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for sure a startup or early data analytics teams within a large company, the expectation is on a wider skill set, maybe less deep to begin with, because that's the resources that are available. The trend has been to become more and more specialized the more mature a company is. So you'll have a data engineering team and a machine learning engineering team and so on. But I guess my challenge here is that maybe that is a level of specialization beyond where we need to be going.
And Paul, what do you think?
My first thought kind of was, isn't the data science space big enough? What other kind of hybrid do we need to find to make data science even cooler than that? Maybe it's also part of, if it's a smaller company, it's probably important that the data scientists or the small group of data scientists are, kind of good in multiple fields, I would say, and have a very wide knowledge across different data science domains. And of course, the bigger your team grows, the more specialized you can go into maybe different problem types like computer vision, NLP time series, for example. I think it's kind of crazy to expect that one data scientist can be an expert in all these 3 domains, and there's, I mean, quite some more. But also, I'm coming back to a point that I made earlier, and I think that's also the argument for this data scientist / data engineer / DevOps expert. I think that it's expected of data scientists today to be good at coding and to not be like, here is my Jupyter notebook, that's my deliverable. Now you go ahead, coder, and kind of bring that to production. I think that a data scientist should be capable enough to kind of deploy, visualize, or kind of publish their work in one form or another, and also kind of fit into this bigger pipeline of coding up solutions within a corporation.
What you just said, Paul, actually triggered something else in my mind for organizations, right? Because obviously there's the specialization or image recognition, natural language processing, and so on. And I'm just thinking, and maybe it's also a question to both of you. Will at one point, because we talked about this central team where we need this somebody who's focused on statistics, but now I'm wondering, actually, does this person even need to be in the organization, or can that be an external that you get in if these skills are needed? Because you don't need maybe a full-time person of that. Depends obviously on the organizational size. And actually, what I hear as well from a lot of providers is that just a generalist data scientist is not something that companies are looking for to hire anymore already. So if then it's really only with specialized skills. So that's also to think about. If I want to be an NLP specialist, do I want a company at a job or at a service provider? But I don't know, what do you guys think? Is that something that you see still in large organizations, or rather external on demand?
So personally, for example, when I interview candidates that have several years of work experience in the field, I kind of, maybe that's just a personal thing, but I kind of like this T-shaped type of experience, to say that they have, like a general knowledge over the wide domain of data science, at least superficially. And then in one stem, they go very deep with their knowledge, where they would say they're an expert in. Maybe 2 stems. But that's something that I really like, because it feels to me that these people are very flexible to, look at different sorts of problems. Even though they may have worked a lot of times on computer vision problems, they can still, look at a tabular data set, run an EDA, and build a simple model on top of it. But I kind of like these types of data scientists that also can go deep into specific problem types or problem statements.
Afgha, I think in one big obstacle to this idea that I can see immediately is the question of data access. Because even companies that are not particularly paranoid about their IP have a legal duty to be paranoid about their data, because mostly it's customer data. And the amount of advice that a person can give without actually being able to look at the data, or sometimes even to look at the code too much, because some companies vastly, I think, overstate the value of their IP, is going to be limited, don't you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point.
But it would. But I think now with time running out, I think the other aspect I would like to cover, now that I think there was a great discussion of the organizational aspects. But now, if you look at it from the point of view of a person who maybe is trying to enter the data science field, and there has been a huge amount of courses in data science, although most of which, as was rightly remarked, having to training how to create models. And in fact, I can still remember the time, maybe 10 years ago, when in most cases you were best off just writing something from scratch. If you understand the math, you throw together a model and it'll perform as good as or better as anything you can download. Whereas these days, you'll be silly trying to create a handmade alternative to XGBoost, for example, or to the Hugging Face libraries and so on and so forth. So what kind of advice would you give to people who are not trying to enter the field? And isn't there a danger that all the time they spend learning about models becomes to a large extent wasted because because just calling the right API would give you better results?
Absolutely not wasted. It's a favorite interview question of mine, in fact. But to know, for example, that you've thrown the data in and you've got out the best score, and then you send that off to some other team to implement it and give predictions, could be missing so much of the nuance. For example, certain models that are partition-based, so tree-based models, random forest, etc., are not very appropriate for NLP tasks. For example, there you might want to use neural networks. And having some basic fundamentals of the mathematics of data science and what the models are doing is essential. As I said before, it's about knowing what it is you're actually passing out. It's not just being the one who can press the button. So yeah, for sure, it's not a waste of time. My advice is that taking a data science course is like learning to drive a car. It does not make you a driver. You still have to, at some point, decide which direction you're going to go in. And maybe you want to drive certain types of vehicles and work in certain types of data science problems. And it's going to take you quite a long time to become actually, a lot of experience to be gained, to become a confident person working with people at a level that makes an impact. That's fine. That is part of the process. Just like when you learn to drive, it takes you a while before they'll let you out in the bus with passengers, if that's your goal. So the advice I'm giving is really, it's fine. It will take a while. On one side, you want to gain experience across a variety of domains. If you don't already have one as your passion, then it's definitely worthwhile at the start of your career, maybe with internships or short stays in different domains. But at some point, you're either going to find yourself drawn to techniques, for example, NLP, and therefore you're going to focus on companies and domains where that is a focus, or you're going to find yourself fascinated by the subject matter, be that insurance or voice analytics, and then focus on that. But give yourself a chance to figure out what it is that you're passionate about by exploring a little bit, and then focus on that passion.
I think I can't remember her name. I believe she's currently the chief decision scientist at Google, and she makes the argument that it may make sense to kind of split the position of data scientists into two directions. One of which is more the research scientists of things, really those people that come up with novel algorithms or models that we haven't seen before. And then the role of more machine learning engineers who kind of use the existing to build models for the company. And she has this nice analogy of a restaurant kitchen. So the research scientists are those basically building the actual gadgets that you may use in a kitchen to produce new food. But the machine learning engineers are more those people that, basically the chefs, the cooks in the kitchen that kind of run around and make new dishes with the tools that they have available. And I think what can help future data scientists is kind of to see in which direction they want to go. Do they want to more work on the applied side of things? Do they want to go into the research direction? But also, second thing that I like to recommend to people is data science in the industry is not a Kaggle competition. I think that many people coming from universities and having worked on a few data science problems on Kaggle, it's a great platform to learn many things and skills. But if they kind of come to the real world and see what a data scientist actually works on and spends their time on, they will be shocked probably of how little time they actually spend on the things that they expected they would spend their majority of time on. And so that's also kind of something that I would just recommend, just as an image, what to expect. That you cannot expect the work of a data scientist to be like competing on Kaggle competitions.
Yeah, Afgha, what would you say?
Yeah, I think I agree with everything that Mark and Paul have said so far, and I will recommend, I think, anybody who would want to work in a classical organization or just in a company, right? That learn to also translate to the business side, yeah, to understand what the business problem is and what this means in terms of data questions, yeah. And actually, it turns out that this is maybe even the most difficult skill to gather, to really make this just translation. And that's something that I would, well, obviously, that's also the direction I come from, but I would recommend to people to do. And I think it's well, what Mark said is go and learn and try out what you like, but also to make yourself wanted by organizations. Know that more and more actually jobs that will be written out will be specialized. And then lastly, I think also we also need to be realistic. And the research scientist, for example, that Paul mentioned, I would expect that that's something that can be done, or will be okay to do for people that have, well, master's degrees in this field, or even only those that have PhDs, to go into this direction, and that it will be unrealistic to have first studied something else, have had a different job, and maybe being 30, 35 years old and trying to get in from the side. You're probably more will need to move towards either the machine learning engineering, or really trying to get to the place where you are in this product team, focusing on, well, again, choosing the right models, but working together with the central team to go into that direction. And a good field, obviously, there is the field that you come from, right? So if you worked in sales before, you want to get into data science, combine it and go into sales analytics, for example. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, that's something I have observed as well. Not so even like 5 years ago, all the cool new papers in machine learning were still things you could read easily, literally. And there were things, half of them were things you felt, so certainly I felt I could have done myself if I happened to look at it. That may not have been true, of course, but the feeling was still there. It was a bit of a gold rush. Okay, you throw an LSTM at this thing and fun stuff comes out. Whereas these days, if you read the papers, you really need to, it's become like much of the rest of academia, where you have to spend a non-trivial amount of time first reading the previous papers, and then you can actually understand what's going on. And yeah, that's a bit of a, well, it's a pity for those of us who like to do research, but yeah, that's becoming more and more specialized, and the bulk of the jobs, I agree, will be in applying them. But following up on that, if we believe, let's assume that within the next couple of years, AutoML will be ubiquitous and work well for most domains of interest. Does that change the way that people who want to go into data science related jobs should are trying to learn data science, or does it not? And if it does, how?
I think it doesn't change what you should learn. Like I said before, you need to understand the fundamentals of what the algorithm does to be able to make an informed choice on the final thing. And of course, you want to take into account explainability, interpretability, etc. It might change the way you approach your first job interviews. If you approach everything as a machine learning problem and then start to list the steps that it takes to train a model, knowing that actually this whole thing is automatable and you're just selling yourself as the old-fashioned human in the loop. I would encourage those of you at the start of the careers who are doing your first interviews, don't just give the steps of a machine learning process or something like this as the answer to a question. Come back with questions. Be the analytics translator, the one who wants to know about the problem and get your fingers into the depth of that. So it doesn't change what you should learn. It changes how you should approach those first job steps.
I like that argument. I would silently sign and put a check mark behind it from my side of things. Just as a side note, Igor, we have a couple of questions under the questions tab, because we only have 5 minutes left, and I didn't want them to go to waste.
Yes, thanks. I was just coming to this. Exactly. So, so one question is, what do you think about automatic encoding models like Copilot and CodeParrot? will they need, just like we were talking about the data scientists maybe becoming obsolete or non-existent? Could these models change what it means to be a developer? Afgha, what do you think?
I prefer to pass this one on to Mark or Paul.
So I immediately had to think of a meme that I saw somewhere, basically saying that what they give us is a model that, given a description in the comments, will then go ahead and generate the code for that description. But what we really want is the opposite, to have a model to look at the code, understand the code, and generate comments for it. But in all seriousness, I think there's probably a lot of room to grow. I mean, these models are getting better and better, and I'm absolutely convinced that these models can automate certain processes which can be understood just given the code and variables that are in there. But there are so many things that we code up or have to code up that do rely on external information. And I think that if we come to the point where we have to think about how can we input this external information in this context, then we're also in a situation where we can just code it ourselves. But of course, they will get better and better. I'm sure of it. I'm not super scared that code will go away. I think Uncle Bob also had a famous quote for that. I think they can make us more productive at least. I'm not so scared that they will take off my job as a programmer, for example.
Awesome. So the other question is, what is your opinion on data-centric AI and technologies for weak supervision, where labeled data is not available or not feasible to obtain?
I can take that, I suppose. Then, of course, anything involving being able to get access to more data is going to be a benefit, right? So weak supervision or semi-supervised learning, I see as a really big leap for the future. We know that basically the major thing that holds back, I'm going to qualify it. The thing that holds back most machine learning problems is getting enough access to labeled data. The thing that holds back real impact is actually everything that happens on the whole pipeline of integrating your model, as Paul has said, being able to code it and put it into the stack of the company that you work with, and indeed having impact, doing the right thing, asking the right questions, answering the right questions. So yeah, it's an improvement on that part of data science for sure, and it's going to change a lot of how we do machine learning inside an organization, but only at the level of how we actually, the kinds of use cases we can tackle. It's more important that what we do has impact and is integrated well into the businesses that we work with.
And I think maybe, to add on that topic, right? When we talk about what you said, Mark, it's the data that's important. What you can think about as well, obviously, is to do data labeling, right? And there are more and more services that make this easier, where we maybe only label a part of the data and then actually predict the other labels, and kind of, you can think about a stage implementation. So put something into production first as a decision support, collect the feedback from the user, and only over time also automate the decision or what you're going to do with it. So it's a staged approach, right? So.
Great. Our time is almost up. So would maybe each of you like to summarize? So if, do you have a one-liner of what does it mean for a data scientist if we believe that AutoML will be pervasive and free?
So I have a small anecdote, and I hope it takes not longer than 30 seconds here. I had a discussion with a colleague about, can these AutoML solutions effectively replace a data scientist? I was arguing against it. He was arguing for it sometime in the future. But in the end, I think we had a similar position on it. We just kind of not really hit the same middle ground. I think that you can use AutoML to make the existing data scientists a lot more efficient. And so you can replace a data scientist by, basically having 3 data scientists, giving them some cool AutoML tool, and have them do the work for 4 or 5 data scientists. I don't think that you will come in a position where you can replace that one data scientist that you have with a piece of software, simply because there's so many other external informations that play into that. But I'm sure that they will change the data science field greatly. But I also agree with Mark that we should probably focus on learning similar things. And it's always good to understand parts of the algorithm underneath the hood.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, I would simply say that AutoML is nothing to be afraid of. Data science is about being able to use the tools at your disposal to make an impact using data. AutoML is just now one of those tools.
I would say it gives you the chance to actually review the statistics around it, so your model assumptions and things like that, and it gives you the time to actually translate to the business, which is something we all need more time for and more skills for. So it's a tool that will help you with that.
Perfect. Thanks a lot.
There is Laura.
Here I am. Thanks so much. That was a brilliant talk, and thank you everyone for joining us. As mentioned, this will be available on YouTube, and it will also be available in your inbox directly after the event has finished. If you do want to find out more about Oxygen Digital or our speakers, then just scroll up in the chat. All of their LinkedIn details are there or on their profiles, and I will also send them round to you as well. But thank you everyone for joining, and thank you panelists. It's been great.
Thank you very much for having us.
We'll go ahead and end the event there. So thank you guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.